Welcome to Tehachapi. Sit back and relax as Key Budge and Corey Costello talk about things that are happening in and around Tehachapi. Here's Corey and Key.
Welcome to another episode of Tehachapi. Key Budge, Corey Costello, we're here in studio. We've got a special guest with us. We're going to talk about C.E.R.T. Corey, we just talked to Southern California Edison. Yep. We talked PSPS, wildfire season. It's wildfire season year-round here in Tehachapi. But I think one of the takeaways we got out of that is PSPS is coming. It might not impact the city as much as it did, but the outlying areas, like for myself out in Bear Valley, I'm going to see it again.
Yeah, and the PSPS we found out last year also was kind of there was a lot of different scenarios that came out of that. Certain communities like yours in Bear Valley didn't have water in certain areas because they couldn't get enough water pumped out of the wells without enough generators. So, okay, then all of a sudden I don't have water. Do I have water prepared? So there's all kinds of different scenarios that come out of that, which although get into that giant conversation of just emergency preparedness in general. And yeah, we touched on it in the last show, but the last 12 months, what we've seen in Kern County, I mean, just sans locusts at this point. I mean, we've seen pretty much everything. So it's just really hammering home for everybody to be prepared.
Yeah, and then with that in mind, coming out of that conversation with Cal Rossi at Southern California Edison, first thing I thought about is C.E.R.T, Community Emergency Response Team. David Shaw joins us. David, welcome. You are the coordinator for our community. You are running the ship here along with your cohorts at Kern County Fire Department.
Thank you very much, Bud. Yeah, it is. It's quite an interesting time that we're in, and the C.E.R.T program is kind of evolving and changing what it was back in when it was first started, and there's a lot of opportunities. It is seeing I always get the acronyms mixed up. PSPSs, we learned a lot. And then as we go into what we've experienced with the COVID pandemic, and I think it's important for people to start looking at their homes, at themselves, and kind of looking back at what we experienced last year, those water situations. Oh my gosh, I can't flush my toilet. What am I going to do? Having some of those extra things out there. It's looking at your family. What is your family's needs?
Exactly right. And as we look back, we look in July, you were one of many that responded to Ridgecrest for the earthquake, so you got to see firsthand what a community was like after being shaken as much as they went through. And were you there during the second?
Yeah, so that was quite an experience for me. And with my kids working in the first responder industry, it was really kind of an interesting thing. I got to call them and say, hey, I guess where I'm going and you're not going. And but I went out, that happened on Friday, the second, the main one, and I went out with Kern County C.E.R.T at midnight, got out there at 1 o'clock in the morning, and for 3 days sat there with the ground shaking, and it was quite an experience. And then to watch the community, I mean, there were all sorts of needs. Now, for the most part, there was no real casualties or anything like that. I was actually staged with my group at the hospital, and we were doing more traffic control, public relations, dealing with the media and things like that, because they had moved the ER center out into the parking lot. So watching people come in and just the different needs there. But as I took breaks and traveled the community, I was able to see, the impact on the stores and how people were being affected by it. I deliberately went down and went to the Red Cross Center, the evacuation center, and that's where I took one of my nap breaks, and to watch and see how people reacted. And it came down to the very basic things. How am I going to turn off my gas? There were like 3 people that showed up and said, I think we have a gas leak, but where do we turn our gas off? And it just reminded me, these basic things you got to be aware of and have a plan for it. We take a lot for granted as a community. So it was a learning experience.
With C.E.R.T, our Community Emergency Response Team, I've gone through the training, and I was a retired first responder. But what it does, that training class, which hopefully will be soon available again once we're finished through the COVID and the get into phase 4 and complete normalcy, we talk about in the training class how to shut off your gas. Things that are what seem to be basic to some. Some people have no idea what it looks like or what they should do, and it actually possibly could save lives. It could protect their property. And these are things that, C.E.R.T, just through the basic training, covers.
The C.E.R.T program, just real quickly, remember, it came to be through the earthquakes and from LA County. That's where it started, and then FEMA took it on after LA County developed it, and it takes different forms based in different areas of the country. If C.E.R.T in the Midwest deals with tornadoes, where you have a whole community wiped out. C.E.R.T in Southern California has a different feel than C.E.R.T up in our area, because our disasters, our needs are different, and what we have to prepare for. Tehachapi, we call it the land of four seasons. Well, it could be the land of how many different types of disasters. We could have a wildfire. We could have a wildfire happening in Bear Valley, and it would not surprise me to have to deal with a flash flood because of lightning strike, a thunderstorm on the east side of the valley. So Tehachapi's got all sorts of different microclimates, dynamics to it that we need to prepare for. And it's preparing for the simple things. What does your family need? What do your pets need? That's the other piece of it. Because as we learned in the Paradise Fire, people put themselves at danger worrying about their pets.
Yeah. And
And pets are so important to us because they are a therapy and they're a family. But if that puts you at jeopardy, you've got to have a plan for that.
And you brought up all the different types of disasters. I just literally jotted down what we've gone through in Kern County in the last 12 months and Tehachapi. So earthquakes, we felt the ones in Ridgecrest. We felt one not too long ago they had in Ridgecrest again. Matter of fact, there was one over here off one of the faults, the Garlock fault, which was we felt in Tehachapi. We had the public safety power shutoffs. We had weather. We had an epic snowstorm. It was really wet. It snapped tree branches. It caused some power issues. So there was that. We had the pandemic, wildfires even recently, just here and there, started by various things. And then not so much in Tehachapi, but kind of around the county, threats of civil unrest. So we've had so many of these things. And I think everybody's responded differently to sort of, filling those out. I mean, when it came to earthquakes, after July 4th, you brought up the shut-off your gas. I went and put a wrench by my gas meter, showed my wife, here's how you do it. I knew how to do it, but I had to let her know. The wrench is there. There's always a wrench there. So in the middle of the night, you can go out there if you need to. Power shutoffs, got a generator and some other supplies there. And then I continue to build just as things. I mean, even with PSPS, we learned some people lost cell service because the cell towers were down because they need power to operate and the generators weren't working. So ways to communicate outside of your cell phone. We used to do that before, and there's still ways out there to communicate minus your cell phone. So those are some of the things, just a few things we've dealt with in this county in the last 12 months.
And I think one of the goals was certain. The reason why I reached out to David to come in and talk to us here on the show was we're not recruiting you to be a disaster service worker. We're not saying we want to put you through the DSW Academy and you're going to go roll out to Ridgecrest for the earthquakes. What we want you to do is learn so your household is better prepared and safe. That's the ultimate goal. If you choose to go on and be a DSW and volunteer, that's outstanding.
Yes.
But
so the structure that over the last several years has kind of changed a little bit. It was, hey, we're going to get everybody trained through the C.E.R.T program, and then, boy, we want you to go out and respond to a disaster. We don't know the disasters. We don't know where that is. But the best thing that we can do is, and our mission right now, is to reach out to the community and educate people on disaster preparedness and get them trained. We have the basic C.E.R.T program, which is about 21 hours, and we do it usually over a weekend, Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And that gives a broad scope of how to take care of yourself, your family, and maybe your neighbor. Because number one is yourself. Number two is your family. Because if you can't take care of your family unless you take care of yourself, then you can reach out and check on your neighbor. It's checking on them. And then for those that want to go a little bit further in the C.E.R.T program, Kern County Fire has the Kern County C.E.R.T program that we lead people through a few classes to become a disaster service worker, where then through their guidance they're deployed. But under the governor's request about a year ago, the program started for California for All, and it's now called California for All Listos. Listos meaning be prepared or preparedness. And we're going to be starting to teach a real short, condensed version of the C.E.R.T program that is just what can you do in a very basic thing. What's basic first aid? What are the basic what we call go bags, preparedness kits? And we've the three of us have been talking here about different types of kits and the information that's out there. Make the initiative. So we're going to reach out, and you'll start as we start coming out of the whole COVID thing in the different phases. We're going to be out there at a bunch of different events, having this information out there, because it's getting that basic, what do you need? And I call it situational awareness. Are you aware of your situation around you? Because that's different than the person down the street.
One thing with all the different kinds of disasters or events that we've talked about, that go bag is universal. So you can prepare yourself, and whether it's the earthquake, the wildfire, you're going to at least have some of the basic tools, necessities ready to go to make life easier for you. And everything that is taught and talked about through C.E.R.T is through FEMA. So this is a national program. This isn't something that was just created and it's our version of something. This is, we follow the curriculum of FEMA. So we want people to really think about taking care of, like you said, yourself, your family. When you're on an airplane, the first thing to do is put the air mask on yourself and then take care of your kids and family, because you're no good if you've become hurt. You're now part of the problem.
Right.
So it's about problem solving, missing that problem if you can, just by just planning.
Right.
And it's not that difficult.
No. And there's so many resources out there for this type of information. Kern County Fire has a whole bunch of information. And if you just Google disaster preparedness or go bags, Red Cross has a whole bunch of information. And it's all, the lists will vary, but the basics of it is all basically the same. And you adapt it to what your needs are, And, you can get really fancy on stuff, but having something. And I will tell you, I am probably, they say the shoemaker's family has bad shoes. I will tell you, my wife was out in that snowstorm, that terrible snowstorm, and she got disoriented and ended up going off the road. And she was disoriented, couldn't tell where she was. And, man, we had a total drill of what we were not prepared for. Was there a blanket in the car? No. Did she have the right shoes in the car? No. So take the opportunity and look at how you live, and then go back and say, okay, what could go wrong, and am I ready for it?
Yeah. And even the simple part, you brought up the stuff in the car. I've had my wife and I both now. We're not commuting anymore like we used to years ago, but we still have in our car. When we lived here and drove to Bakersfield a lot, and we keep them in there anyway. But it was that simple couple bottles of water in a bag, and really the most awful MRE we could pretty much find, and put it in there, because how many times have we heard about the highway getting closed, whether it's snow, an accident, and people are literally stranded for hours in something that's completely out of your control. And then, you don't have anything. You don't have a blanket in the car, and you're sleeping in your car or whatever it might be. So even as just the little things, if you're a commuter, what do you have in your vehicle to help you maybe make it through the night if the highway's closed one direction or the other?
And one thing we always talk about when we do emergency preparedness, September's emergency preparedness month, isn't it? September or October? It's
every month of the year now. Yeah, in this day and age,
true.
in 2020, it's every month. It's disaster preparedness year.
Yeah, that is a fact. But we always tell people, shoot for 3 days.
Right.
To be able to be sustainable for 3 days. Right. 3 days worth of water, 3 days worth of medications, food, whatever it is that you need, and then also for your pets, and then for each member of your family. I mean, that's the minimum goal.
Right.
So I know that I had purchased one of those emergency buckets, thinking, okay, great. Now, I was able to find all of those items between the dollar store, Walmart, and it was probably about a third of the price. I mean, it's convenient. Right. They ship me one. When I looked at everything, I go, I bet I can find this stuff, locally, put together my own Home Depot bucket or Tractor Supply bucket. Right. And I think Tractor Supply even has the food lock lids. Nice. So you can actually put those twist-on bucket lids onto a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with things, and then store it in a place that where it's at and is accessible for really $35-$40 a person. You can be set up for at least 3 days with emergency supplies.
Yeah. And really, we do encourage, do 3 days, but if you can do a little bit more, it's just that much less stress on you. Yeah. Because in a disaster, the stress that comes out catches you off guard. And if you can mitigate a little bit of the stress, then you can focus on other needs, taking care of your family, checking on your neighbors. we as a society, we're kind of changing a little bit. I used to know everybody on my street. I could just name every house. I'm lucky if I know 3 neighbors down from me. So I think that's another important piece. And building those go bags can actually be a fun family project. I mean, okay, everybody go to the dollar store, and here's how much money you get. What can you put together to fit your needs? And it would be something kind of fun to do.
My kids are surviving off Snickers bars then for 3 days.
Well, there's a lot of protein. There's a lot of protein in a Snicker bar.
It's going to be $30 worth of candy. Yeah,
Right.
Somehow it's going to work.
Exactly.
They'll be bouncing off the wall for the first day with all that sugar.
David, you'd mentioned before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about some of your certifications and training, but you pointed out the mental aspects of all of this. And I say all of this because we're still in a state of an emergency with COVID-19, and so that's still weighing heavily on people's minds, literally. So can you mention that and expand upon that a little bit, and really the mental preparation side of all of this?
Yeah, just to give you a little background, I grew up in a family that my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, my siblings all went into medicine. I was the rebel, and I went into technology. Go figure. But one of the classes that we teach in the C.E.R.T program is disaster psychology, and it's a short little section of it. And then I had the opportunity to go down to San Diego, and I took another class called First Aid Psychology. And it really covers the points of what psychologically the impacts of disasters and the fatigue and the symptoms that come out of that. And having gone to Ridgecrest and spent 3 days outside watching a community pull themselves back together and deal with that. And an earthquake, it happens, but then it continues, because those aftershocks keep hitting you.
Yeah, people didn't want to sleep inside in their homes in Ridgecrest. From some of the folks I spoke with, they were sleeping on their lawns. They just did not want to be inside of their homes because the aftershocks continue.
Yes. So, and I grew up in Southern California with all the different Northridge earthquakes and things like that. And when I came home, it took me 3 days after those 3 days to recover. And I was like, my gosh, why am I so exhausted? And it creeps up on you. And what we've gone through with this COVID pandemic is probably one of the country's largest disasters, and we're living a disaster. Mm-hmm. So it is impacting us all. And the different things that you can come out of it with and experience is fatigue, anxiety, depression, lack of appetite. I've talked to several people.
No problem with that.
Yeah.
Zero. The actual opposite. I've eaten too much, most likely.
Some people have lost weight. Other people have gone, oh my gosh, all I do is think about food. What's my next meal? Because all I've got to do is just sit at home, and it's sure a lot easier to drive up to restaurants now and just have them bring it out.
Yeah,
to you,
they're like putting all this great food on Facebook. You're like, yeah, that looks good tonight. I'll get some of that.
Exactly.
Thus the COVID-19.
The COVID-19 for sure.
And it can also create stress within your family. I know in the early couple weeks of it all, my coworkers, as we were talking, gosh, why did I bite my family member's head off on that? These are all things that we really need to sit back and look at. It's not us doing it deliberately. Mm-hmm. It's the stress that's there. You'll have normal daily activities, but subliminally, you've got, I'm worried about, where am I going to get my next roll of toilet paper? Sorry to use that pun out there, but it was real.
There.
It was real.
It was real.
But those things you have to acknowledge and give them credit and realize, okay, you know what? I need to go take that walk.
Yeah.
I need to take care of myself. Mentally, you've got to get yourself in a place where you're comfortable, because the next stage of it is it'll start hitting you physically and affect the family and things. So don't discount it.
Yeah.
Disaster psychology and the impacts of disaster are there, and give him credit.
It's almost like it reminds me of like a computer. Your computer slows down because you've got things running in the background, and you actually do your Control-Alt-Delete and see what's going on in the system. You got all these 15 background programs running. Well, no wonder your computer's not running quickly. Our minds are like that too, and you pointed that out. Well, even working here, I mean, there have been days, and a lot of this during COVID-19, because of all the uncertainty. Which businesses are open, aren't open, can't be open, essential, non-essential, go down the list. And this is weighing on me. It's weighing on others who are trying to get life back and running for our neighbors. But then at the end of the day, you're just thinking, gosh, 3 o'clock rolls around and you hit a wall because, gosh, I'm just really tired. I don't know why. And this makes complete sense.
This is, and giving credit to our first responders. I mean, this is what they live.
Yeah.
And Key, your background in it, you see things and you're exposed to things, and you have a tendency to have a lot of empathy and sympathy toward it, and you have a tendency to put yourself in those shoes of those people that are experiencing it. We are a country of instant information and knowledge, and we're seeing, and we sit in Tehachapi, which is self-distancing by its nature on its own, but we're kind of secluded. But at the same token, I can sit there in the morning, get up in the morning, and I could be glued to the TV for a week, just consumed on what's happening in New York, and I hear it and know it quickly. And we have to be diligent to put it into perspective. Don't overconsume yourself with it, because you can just throw yourself into a depression on that.
Oh, yeah. Very quickly you can look and say 2 hours has passed in a blink of an eye,
right,
and all you've been doing is just staring at the TV or the computer screen, getting information that you've already had.
Yeah.
I think there was nothing really changing. We were hoping something was going to change.
Exactly.
There was going to be something new that was going to break through, and it wasn't there.
Right.
And we still stayed glued to it. Yeah. I found that in 9/11, very similar for that, being glued to what was going on in parts of the country where we had the terrorist attacks, and you get locked in,
Right.
and hyper-focused, and I think that hyper-focus is exhausting.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And you definitely have to break away. You have to turn off your technology. Sure. You have to step away and unplug in order to clear the head and kind of hit that reset button.
Yeah.
And working in public safety for as long as I did, wildfires, and you start to see the fear and panic in people's eyes, and their entire lives are there, and they're 40-foot high flames coming their way, and it's like, no, I can't give this up. I've worked my entire life for that. Your mind does different things. You set yourself up to be invincible.
Right.
For some it's you just lock up in fear and you freeze, and others it's flight. It's like, okay, let's take what we can and let's go. I mean, there's different reactions that occur with these different kinds of events.
Right. And we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started this. And again, I hate to use the toilet paper. The COVID, when you think of COVID, we're going to think of toilet paper,
right,
and water. Corey, with the city, we never had a water issue.
Yeah, we were trying to tell people, like, your water is not going to be affected by a pandemic. Like,
I serve on a water district board, and our water and our service was in great shape.
100%.
And I could not figure out the rush for water. I mean, I'm going to need to wash my hands, I guess, a lot, but I mean, I wasn't
use tap water for that.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So
probably because we tell people to have a 3-day water supply for an emergency.
Exactly.
And they just that's the first thing I got to have.
Yeah.
So this fight or flight
right.
is a natural reaction, and being prepared. So if we can really sum it down into it, is look at your family's needs, understand what you really need to get by with.
Right.
And if you look at what we dealt with the rush on toilet paper, it was a panicked move, because we all know how much toilet paper we need.
Yeah.
I can go to Costco and get a big bag, and that lasts me a while. Okay.
Right.
And I stepped back and I said, okay, do I really need this? But emotionally, I'm watching everybody rush, and I will tell you, I got hooked into it going, there's a bag of it on the shelf. I should get that because everybody else is.
Right.
And to your point, Key, we've got to put things in perspective. On the power shutoffs, everybody was buying generators.
Right.
Okay, do I really need the generator? Well, maybe I do because everybody else is buying it. But I had an RV. I didn't need the generator because my refrigerator runs off of propane.
Right.
So adapt and don't get caught up in the rush of the herd.
Everyone's needs are different.
Right.
They're individual. The three of us sitting here, we have different needs for our family. We're geographically separated, but we have to have a plan.
Yes.
And that's where we need to start having these discussions, with our spouses, and then with our kids, and then even with the neighbors. What's the plan? Mm-hmm. I have plans with my neighbors. If they're out of town and they need something, they know how to contact me. Those are kind of the baby steps of getting a plan started.
Right.
They need something, I can step in.
Right.
And vice versa. But you got to do it and you have to plan. The family's not together. What do we do if it's during work and we're 15 miles from home, or 25 miles or 50 miles from home? Or what happens if it's the middle of the night? Right. There are different events that take place, different times of the day. We never know when it's going to happen. except for PSPS, if they tell us it's going to happen at this time, we're going to throw the switch, you can pretty much guarantee that they're going to throw the switch and we won't have power
3 hours earlier. No,
Right.
I'm just kidding. We dealt with that.
But I mean, Edison's promised that they've really improved
Right.
that notification
I think
system.
they've learned the system as well.
Right. But we do know, I know in my area, I'm going to have a PSPS event. So I have to be sustainable. Now we had 3.5, 4 days a couple of times last year. I'm hoping not for that length.
Right.
But I have to make the plans for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I have to, and my plans will be different than what yours are, and yours are
Yeah, right.
just based on what our individual needs.
Right. And in the C.E.R.T program, one of the things that we first off tell people is, how are you going to communicate?
Yeah.
Again, you're number one, your family's number two, and then reach out to your neighbor. How are you going to communicate? Cell phones, as well, they are the new old phone on the wall.
Yeah.
Those are really important. Having a good contact list, and here's the thing, have a contact list and a central communication point outside of Tehachapi, even outside of the state. Because of the way communications work and our telecommunications work, sometimes a phone call out of the state of California can get through where it cannot get at within the state of California. Right. So having that. Another good thing is text messaging actually goes through a whole different frequency band.
Right.
And those text messages go to servers, they sit on servers, and when things happen, they flood back, they continue through. So if a relative or somebody you're trying to get a hold of doesn't get that message right away, they'll get it eventually. Yeah. So text messaging can be very vital. Now, in the Ridgecrest Earthquake, we found that amongst our team that we were working with, the best thing we were doing was texting, because phone calls, they were getting overloaded, so the text messaging became key. But another thing is keeping your car within your family. Just get the family radios. They go maybe 2 miles. But if, let's say you're down in Bakersfield and your family gets separated, you can pretty well get yourselves connected at some point. And those two-way radios can be a real benefit as well.
What if you took it to the next level just a little bit? Because I recently did this, because it actually was a scenario Key threw out earlier. My wife and I both work during the day. Our young children are somewhere, usually at a daycare. And so if we have an event, something happens, cell phones are an issue, and we kind of experimented with the two-way radios, but we work too far apart to make that work. Right. But they make a very good sort of handheld CB now to get back on the old Citizens band.
Right.
And so we've actually just purchased those, so we'll have those, and they charge almost like a cell phone, and then you don't have to, it's not a big unit in your truck necessarily. And I even went as far as that to say, okay, we have to be able to get on the same page. And it was just a quick call and then a meet. At least we have the reliability of that band.
Corey, that's perfect, because again, every family's needs are a little bit different.
Yeah.
We all have, a bunch of us have older relatives. I have a mother-in-law down in LA, and how am I going to communicate with her? Special needs is a very important thing, in disasters, on how you deal with that. So you take seniors that don't hear very well or have hearing aids. Do you have a plan to be able to communicate with them? They're not going to be able to take care of that. So having the meeting place, where are you going to meet? It's just like we learned in school. If there's a fire, you get out, and where do you meet? Have a central meeting place. I've done drills at my office. In your workplace, have a central meeting place. And then outside of the area communication, that you can relay information. In all the disasters that I've watched over the years, you've got to have those outside of the area communications that you can relay it. And then clear information. Here's another thing that came out of the state of California EOC was, do you have all your documents in place? Do you know all your credit cards? Do you know where your birth certificates are? Do you have copies of those? In a digital world, put them on a thumb drive. Keep them in your emergency bag or something like that. Safe.
Yeah.
But have them. And then another thing that we're starting to teach is, do you have cash set aside for an emergency? Do you have that savings put aside in case of an emergency? One of the directors of FEMA said that's one of their biggest challenges is people don't have financially saved up funds to get them by. Right. Because ATMs aren't going to work, possibly. I wouldn't rely on it, I was in the COVID, I was afraid to use my ATM. Is that safe to be doing that? But keep some emergency cash. And build up that savings to be prepared.
And when you do that, do it in small denominations.
Right.
Don't just keep $100 bills or 20s, because if you go to buy that jug of water, it might just be a $20 or $100 jug of water, because they may not have change to give you back if they're able to sell, something, if they've got no power, they may not be shut down anyway. But if you do have small denominations, so you're at least able to purchase at market value.
And I just, want to share, be patient with everybody.
Right.
I've seen through this town, hope lives here, Tehachapi strong. If we can look at a positive side of what we're going through, is that I truly believe that for Tehachapi, and I think other areas, we have come together more as a society. Yes, we've had the demonstrations and the uprisings, and we can all determine how that comes about. But I think it's because people really do care, and I think it's important to give the grace to others during disasters. Because Corey, you may bark at me, but it's your way of releasing some tension, and I've got to give you the grace to be able to do that.
What we want to do is we've got forms that we have downloaded from FEMA. We're going to make those available to anyone that would like them. So we'll put a link. We'll actually load these maybe onto our website, and then, or you can send me a email at media@tehachapicityhall.com, and I'll send you a digital version so you can print these out. These are free of charge. The federal government provides these to us, and we want to share them. We're all on the same page with that. But if people want to get more information on C.E.R.T, because you guys still throw safety tips, even though you're not doing the training, where you've got social media presence and a website.
Yes. So we've got a website, TehachapiCert.com. We have a Facebook page that is Tehachapi C.E.R.T. A lot of information comes out on that Facebook page. You can get engaged in it. There are links in there to communicate with us as well. There's Kern County Fire has links to that as well, and they have a whole bunch of information. And then we are working, our nonprofit organization, the Tehachapi Valley C.E.R.T program, we're working on putting together how we're going to continue to teach the classes. We don't know what the guidelines are going to be, but one way or another, we're going to teach the classes in a very safe and respectful way. And we may condense them down into shorter things, but we would love to have people get engaged and become involved, because there's lots of opportunities out there.
Yeah, my wife and I went through the class together. My son went through it himself, and even me as a retired first responder, I was able to take away some things that I hadn't been exposed to before. So it was great information. And whether or not you want to be a DSW, a disaster service worker or not, the information you get that just helps your family that's there is ideal. And we want you to start to have a conversation. Start with a plan and start to prepare yourself. You say, hey, I don't have the money to put these things together. Every time you go to the store, see if you can just buy one item to go in that bucket. And then know where you're going to put that bucket or that go bag.
And as the joke in our family is, don't rob Peter to pay Paul. Don't get the Band-Aids out of the disaster bag without putting them back.
Thank you. That's my house with the batteries. Yeah. I'm thinking every time I go to there's a power outage, I say, where all the flashlights go? Well, the kids took them to do something else, and they're supposed to be in the emergency cabinet, but they're not. And the batteries are gone.
So if you're gonna avoid taken from the go bag and the disaster bag, you know what? You can be really creative, and it can be fun too.
It can. It's a family project. I love that. Is there anything else that maybe you'd like to throw out there that we didn't ask you or we didn't talk about? You've got great information on the website and Facebook, so folks can get answers there. And of course, we're happy to send any questions that come our way to you, so that way you can answer them for folks.
We covered a lot of information here, and it's a lot to take in. So just go down to the basics. Make the plan, think of your situation, and think about how you would deal with different things. And yes, we can't think of every scenario, but I really thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, and we'll provide the detailed list of all the different items that are on these go bags that we talked about. So I know we didn't get into each item, but we've got those lists for you, so we'll provide them. Media@TehachapiCityHall.com. I'm Key Budge. For Corey Costello, David Shaw, we appreciate you joining us. This was hopefully a very informative period of time, and we appreciate it.
Tehachapod is a conversation about Tehachapi, designed for the people who live here or who would like to know more about this mountaintop community. If you have a question you would like answered, email media@TehachapicityHall.com. We will try to answer it on a future episode of Tehachapod.